Welcome to the Cairn. I'm Ben Walker. This is where we sit down with leaders navigating real challenges, people thinking seriously about the future and what it takes to balance people, process and technology when everything's changing. Each episode we explore how leaders actually build strategy, drive real change and get things done in an increasingly uncertain landscape. Whether they're transforming education or revolutionising patient care, these are the conversations with people getting it done. Practical thinking, real outcomes. This is the Cairn. Let's get into it. Today, I'd like to welcome Gabrielle Dolan. Gabrielle, or Rel, is a global authority on strategic storytelling and authentic communication, whose expertise has helped leaders and organisations connect more deeply, drive culture, and build trust in today's complex business environment. Rel has authored several acclaimed books, including her latest, Story Intelligence, and has worked with clients ranging from major banks and corporates to global non-profits. Her approach is renowned for blending practical frameworks, engaging delivery, and a refreshingly jargon-free style. Today's conversation is an exploration into how storytelling can enhance human leadership and communication in a world awash with AI-generated content. Welcome, Rel.
Wow, thanks for that intro, Ben. Yes, it's good to be here talking about all things storytelling and AI, of course.
Fantastic. And you're immersed in that at the moment with the release of your book, but we are going to get to that.
Yes, it's right into it.
So my first question for you is, how did you become interested in stories and storytelling as a tool for leadership? Was there a specific moment or experience that has shaped your view around storytelling being critical for leaders?
Yeah, look, it was probably a critical moment over a couple of years. So not one defining moment. And it all happened when, I used to work at National Australia Bank. So, one of Australia's largest organisations and therefore banks. And what in my last few roles, so I started off in technology. So I was sort of, I'll show my age here, Ben. I started my career as a trainee mainframe computer operator. So it was it was a long time ago. But then I was at NAB for, a couple of decades, and I gradually moved into senior leadership roles. And my last couple of roles were in change management. So managing big digital transformations across the organization. And it was in those two roles as leading people, but also in change, that I noticed that when I shared a story, it seemed to get the message across better. It seemed to, people would understand the message a bit better, and, and in change, they would sort of go, oh yeah, good point. I never thought about it that way. It wasn't a silver bullet, but I remember thinking there's something in this. There's something about storytelling that seems to be, helping me communicate and, more importantly, helping me influence more effectively. So this was probably about 24 years ago. And what I did is I looked around and I discovered a book by Stephen Denning, and it was called, oh my God, I forget it, but it was The Guide to Organizational Storytelling, I think. And he was a senior exec at the World Bank. And so I read the book and it made all perfect sense to me. But I also thought, if a senior exec at the World Bank is talking about the power of storytelling, I think there's something in this. So, part of my job at NAB was also designing and delivering leadership programs. So I could see storytelling was a skill. And with my experience in designing and delivering training programs to leaders, I thought, I think this is a skill people should learn. And so nearly 21 years ago, I left my corporate job and have been working with business people, whether they're SMEs or on the board or senior execs or salespeople, how to communicate and influence more effectively through stories. And here I am, 21 years later.
Wow. So I think you spent about 17 years
Yeah, it was 17 years at NAB, 21 years out. Do not do the maths on that, because that's like...
No, we don't want to start adding numbers together. Never want to do that. What was the turning point? So did you reach a point and you're like, right, I'm going to set a new trajectory, or was it an opportunity came up? How did that come together?
Yeah, look, I think like anything in life, certainly this is my life, when things don't go to plan. So when, I sort of, even though I was thinking there's something in storytelling and I think this is a, skill people could be learned, I certainly wasn't thinking of going out and doing it on my own. Maybe there was a little thought of that, but I had my heart set on a goal of a position, and it was the global head of learning for National Australia Bank. So, 5 years prior, I thought, right, in 5 years' time, I want that job. I went and did an MBA. Everything I did was towards this job. And in about 5 years' time, a restructure came up and this job was there. And so I applied for it. And, I had well and truly let people know that that's the job I want. And being the confident person, perhaps overconfident, I actually thought I would get it. And I didn't get it. And I remember the woman who I would have been reporting into, and I actually knew her quite well. And she sort of said to me, she goes, Ral, this is probably the hardest decision I've made, but I'm not going to offer you the job. And she talked about why, were all valid reasons. And I still remember her saying, what do you think you're going to do? And I just said, I think it's time to go. I think it's time to go and do something different. And she actually said to me, you've actually been talking about running your own company on storytelling and stuff. And part of me went, had I verbalized it out loud? Clearly I had. So I literally made that decision right there and then. And I remember coming out and I rang my husband, and I wouldn't normally ring him at work during the day. And it was like, what? And he goes, I've just decided to leave NAB. And he went, oh, well, okay, if that's what you want. And I mean, I was working on a project. So I did say to, the manager, I will work on the project and see it out the project was ending in 3 or 4 months. So I'll see it out and then I will leave. And, Ben, it's one of those things I kept thinking, will I wake up one morning and go, what the hell have I done? And I never did. And I've never, it just then seemed right. And here we are. Now everyone's talking about storytelling.
Yes, exactly. Things can suddenly, I guess, come together, or you have to make them come together.
Yeah. And it certainly wasn't sudden, because when I first started, people would be going, storytelling? What the storytelling's got to do with business? Why would I share a story in business? And so, it certainly took a while educating the audience, educating the market, and now people rightly see it as a key leadership and communication and influence skill.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think stories matter more now in business and leadership than perhaps they have over the last 21 years?
Yeah, look, I think they've always mattered. I think they absolutely, sharing stories has always been important. We never thought it was professional. But I think it's always mattered. The reason I think it matters even more now than ever before, and it was actually the reason I wrote my book, and I actually felt compelled to write it, is we're in a world of distrust. So if you follow the Edelman report, the Edelman report's been going for 20 years and they release it every 20 years. We are in the highest level of distrust. And for the first time ever, employees are distrusted, or employers are distrusted. So we're in a world of distrust. We don't know what who to trust. And also with AI, and I know you do a lot of work in the AI space, there's a lot of benefits to AI, clearly, but there's a lot of downside. And we're seeing AI, the deep fakes, the fake videos. And so it's getting harder to distinguish what's real and what's not. But also what we're seeing is an absolute onslaught of AI generated content. So, you only need to look at LinkedIn, for example, and there is so much AI generated content that it's all starting to feel the same. It's all starting to feel a bit bland and beige. And I truly believe in a world of distrust and AI generated content that your stories are needed now more than ever. And I think what we will be craving is those authentic personal stories, and they will get cut through where AI generated content won't, but people will be really craving them. So, we need to start sharing them more and sharing them well.
Exactly. And I like what you said there, because those were the exact words that came into my mind. Cut through. Cutting through all of the fuzz, cutting through all of the garbage that's just spewed out there through various different forms, including AI at the moment.
Yeah.
So when you're working with leaders and you help them to start to gain control over and master storytelling, what do you see as the tangible impacts in, I guess, them immediately and as they start to develop their skills?
Yeah, look, it's I think what I find, and probably what I absolutely love about what I do, is I'll run a workshop for leaders, and I'll run into someone, whether it be 6 months later or 6 years later, and they will say that after attending your workshop changed the way I communicated and changed the way I led. So because what that tells me is that they've actually gone out and shared a story and they've seen the impact. So perhaps I'll give you an example, because I think hearing examples will help your listeners understand what we're sort of talking about around storytelling and the power of storytelling. I think one of the most powerful stories you can share are the non-work related stories connected to a work message. So, I mean, the work stories are still good, but it's the non-work ones that can actually have the greatest impact. So, an example I often share in my workshop is I was working with a risk team. So it was the entire risk team, and the head of risk, her name was Rosemary. And Rosemary said, one of the biggest challenges that I have is that when I'm talking around risk management, as soon as risk is raised, everyone looks at me and goes, you're the risk manager, that's your job. And I'm sure people in HR get, you're the people person, that's your job. And she said, it doesn't matter how many times I've told them I cannot manage your risk for you. All I can do is help you manage your risk. She says the message doesn't get through. The behavior doesn't change. You could see she was really frustrated, and she's going, I have tried everything. I've provided case studies, examples, the benefits of managing your own risk, the consequences of nothing's changing. And so she said she tried everything. She tried everything except a personal story. So let me share the story that she shares, and then I'll ask you and
Awesome.
and your listeners the impact of that. So she said, when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, and growing up on a farm, there was all these dangers we needed to be aware of, but Mum would teach us what to do. So we knew what to do when we came across redback spiders in the timber heap. We knew about all the potential traps in the dam after heavy rain, and we knew what to do if we ever came across a snake in summer. And I remember this hot day, Mum was yelling at me to get my bike from the gate. So I ran down to the gate to get my bike, and then I just froze, because in front of my bike was this massive copperhead snake. But I remembered everything Mum taught us to do. So I played statues, and I slowly walked backwards until there was enough space between me and the snake, and I ran back to house to tell Mum. And I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of the role we play in risk. All I can do is give you the skills, knowledge, and advice, so when you come across your own copperhead snake, regardless of what that looks like, you will know what to do. Now, Ben, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and for those listening, ask yourself this question. Does that story help you understand the role of a risk manager better and the role you play in risk? Does it actually help you understand that message better?
Absolutely. And the thing that pops into my mind is prevention.
Yes.
Being prepared.
Yeah, exactly. And that was her message. Like, it's I can't be there for you. You need to be prepared. So that was her message. So it helps you understand the message. The second question, do you think you'll remember that story?
I will, because it is memorable.
Yeah. So you'll absolutely
Yes,
you can relate. And I've even I know you're from New Zealand, and I remember the first time I shared that in New Zealand, someone said, "Oh my God, I relate to that story so much. We don't even have snakes in this country." But we've all, it's not like you have to have experienced exactly the same experience to relate to it. You relate to the broader message of being prepared for when something comes your way. And then the other question is, do you think you could retell that story without losing its meaning? Like, you wouldn't do it word for word. Yeah, you could. You'd give it a go without just... Yeah. So I'm going to, say to your listeners, when it comes to communicating, the biggest challenges you have is, do people understand what you're saying? Like, really, really understand it? Do they remember it? So when the meeting's over, when the presentation's finished, when the discussion has ended, do they actually remember what you said? And if they had to, could they retell it to others without losing its meaning? And a story, a personal story, will give you traction on those 3 things: understand, remember, retell. Where facts, figures, data, I'm not saying you don't need them, but they're not sticky. It's the stories that's sticky. So the stories can make your messages sticky. It's the human brain. That's what we remember the stories, because it taps into some form of emotion. And I'm not talking about emotional, but without you knowing it, that story has tapped into emotion.
Absolutely. So I guess part of what you're saying there is there's kind of a timeless foundation to storytelling in terms of the messaging, the personal stories. Do you think over time leaders and what's your experience been with leaders helping them to reimagine their approach and leveraging technology, etc., to produce better stories or think of better stories or curate their stories in a more memorable way?
Yeah, look, well, I've seen a change. If I just stick with storytelling at the start and then I'll move to technology, 20 years ago when I started doing this, I would go into a training room, and I can guarantee you half the people in the room would be sitting there, arms folded, thinking, "What the hell has storytelling got to do with business?" And it would be that would be half my crowd. Over time, I don't come across anyone like that now. I might be one person that's thinking, "Oh, I couldn't use it in this situation or that situation," but over time, you've seen that people actually realize, because they experience that, yes, stories are powerful, and we can have all the data and the facts and that, but it's a bit dry and it's not memorable. And so, how do we use storytelling strategically when we actually want to get our message across and we want people to understand it? So I've seen that shift. What I've seen now with technology and specifically AI, and I write about this in my book. In fact, there's a whole, even though I'm saying stories are needed now more than ever because of all the AI generated crap out there, right? AI is not the enemy. It's like, what? PowerPoint's not the enemy. It's just a really bad use of PowerPoint that's the enemy. So AI is not the enemy. So I'm starting to introduce, and this is relatively new to people, so I haven't seen the take on how you use AI as your creative partner in storytelling. And that's, my Story Intelligence is not a book about AI. It's a book about story predominantly, but there is a whole chapter in there about how you use AI to help find and refine your story. So, one of the things I talk about is like, Ben, if you said, "Hey, Raoul, I've got a meeting next week or a presentation, I need to talk about innovation, and I want to share a personal story, but I can't think of one," and you rang me up and said, I need help trying to think of a personal story. The first thing I would do is go, "Okay, so what does innovation mean to you?" And to make sure you're really clear on innovation. And then I would just ask you a whole heap of questions. I would go, "So tell me a time when you did something different and it had a good result." Or tell me a time when you just kept doing the same thing all the time and was reluctant to change. Or have you ever had a time when? And I would ask you all these questions. And by asking you those questions, you would think of a story. You'd absolutely think of a story. So what I would say, open up ChatGPT, literally type in a prompt going, "I'm looking for a personal story around innovation. Can you act as my storytelling coach and ask me questions to help me find the story?" What ChatGPT, it'll spit out probably 10 or 15 questions. One of them will resonate with you and you'll go, "Oh yeah, I've got a story." Then normally what ChatGPT will say, would you like help turning that into a story? And it asks you to sort of give me some details. So you give it some details, almost bullet point, and then it takes that and turns it into a story. Now, when I started researching this, I was pleasantly surprised how good it was. Even probably, maybe not even, maybe disappointed how good it was. I don't know what it was, but it was good. I was shocked. I think shocked in a bad way by going, "Oh shit, this is actually pretty good." Now then, it creates a story. Now some of it's filling in the gaps, right? It's so some of it's not true. So if it's not true, of course you're not including it. But some of it might be it didn't happen that way, but it happened this way. And so it's giving you the bones of a story to work from. And so that's when you would change it. You would make sure it's still true. You'd use your own voice, make sure you don't lose your voice. The worst thing you want to do and go, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a great story," cut and paste and just share it because it's not your story. So it's using it as your creative partner, not handing over control to it.
Awesome. And I've got your book right here, Raoul, and I know that you relay a lot of the, the rules and how to actually leverage generative AI to be your creative partner. But what I want to focus on for a start is story intelligence, the craft of authentic storytelling made smarter with AI. What does story intelligence mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's fun. It just you just read the tagline there. It's been really interesting when I go, oh, you've written a new book. What's it called? I go, it's called Story Intelligence, and people go, right. And then I go, I do the tagline, the craft of authentic storytelling made smarter with AI, and they go, oh my god, that sounds amazing. It was just like, so I get story intelligence is not a common phrase, and it's so common there's no definition, so I actually had to make up a definition. And the reason I liked the thing story intelligence, because as soon as I thought of story intelligence, I thought, oh, that reminds me of emotional intelligence. And so, it's sort of got the EQ, the SQ, the IQ, but there was no definition. And so I had to come up with a definition, and which I'll just read, but then I want to talk to you about the struggle I came up to define this. So first of all, if you set yourself a dictionary definition, you sort of go, okay, I want it to be good for a start. So what I said storytelling is, it's the ability to purposefully and skillfully use authentic storytelling to communicate with clarity and to connect, engage, and inspire. And there's some key phrases in there. And one, it's purposefully and skillfully. So you're doing this deliberately and strategically. You know why you're doing it, but there's a skill around it. I think the other thing, or the other key word there, is authentic. So these are true stories, authentic storytelling. And then it is why you're doing it. You're either doing it to communicate with clarity, so being clear on your message, or to connect, engage, or inspire your audience. Now, because I've got AI in the subtitle, there was a lot of discussion with my editors and publisher about, do we include AI in the definition of story intelligence? And so they wanted to include it, like, adding something about and using AI to help with that. And in the end, and this was a discussion that actually went on for quite a while, and I was in two minds myself about whether to include AI in the definition. And in the end, I pushed back because I thought you could be brilliant at storytelling. You could just have really high story intelligence and never use AI. I mean, the reality is I consider myself high on story intelligence, and I've been doing it all my life up until about a year ago, starting to experiment with AI. So you don't need to use AI, but there are ways you can use it, like we just went through before, as maybe your little creative partner to help you think of stories. So, and I do go through in the book how, like in a lot more detail, how you can use AI to help find your stories, but also refine your stories.
Fantastic. And I really like the idea of story intelligence being something innate within people, opposed to something that's dependent on an external technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Because it is. So a lot of people go, "Oh, I don't tell story. I'm not." So a lot of people say to me, "I'm not a storyteller," and I go, first of all, you're human, therefore you are a storyteller. So we tell stories. Some may be naturally better at than others, just like, you may be naturally better, I don't know, just for example, Ben, long distance running than me. I was like, naturally better. But if it's a skill, the more time, the more you learn about it, the more effort you put in, the more practice you do, you're going to get better at it. And so whether it's tennis or golf or storytelling, the more you do it, the more you learn about it, you will get better at it. So on one hand, it is natural, but doing it purposefully in business, there's a skill involved in that. And like any other skill, it can be taught and it can be learnt, and you can get better at it.
Excellent. It makes me think about a book, another excellent book that I read recently, which was Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari.
Yeah.
He talks about the evolution of knowledge. I'm not sure if you've read that one.
I read his previous one, Sapiens.
Oh, yes.
And and you want to talk about the power of storytelling in that. He's literally saying what sets us apart from any other animal on the world is our ability to tell stories.
Absolutely. And he talks a lot about in this book about the evolution of knowledge, essentially. So we go from storytelling and, stories being sort of a currency in the way that people are spreading knowledge prior to the printing press, and then everything changes and knowledge is starting to be dispersed and misinformation in different ways. So we went from thousands of books to millions of books within 50 years. Storytelling storytelling changes at that stage depending on the technology, and then again we've changed with the democratization of expertise, and people are having to adapt and tell stories, and as you say, we still have to be authentic ourselves as we tell these stories, but we've just got different technology that we're working with that can become our creative partner.
It's a different it's a different medium, and I don't want to go back to the cave walls, but you look at, well, first, Australians been known as the oldest culture in the world, and if you go and do those I didn't know this until I went to Uluru, and the typical cave paintings where you see pictures. Well, there was caves, and they would have men's caves, so men business, and women's cave, women's business, and the caves that have got the pictures on it are teaching caves. So the storytelling was back then, and their medium was drawing on a cave wall. That was their medium. Their biggest medium was the oral tradition. So again, in Australia, Indigenous, it's dream times. These stories are being passed on for tens of thousands of years, and the message has not changed. And I was actually recently on a safari in South Africa, and the first night, you go to bed and they've turned it down, and there's a little bookmark, and it's like African bedtime stories, like how the cheetah got his spots, or how the zebra got their stripes, and so and each night you got a new story. And my God, I was looking out. It's sort of like I'm so excited about what story is going to be next. But that's another example of those African bedtime stories. And so the storytelling's always been around. It's just now the medium changes, like the printing press. So that became now, social media, like, influencers. There's just so many ways to share your story. So the medium's changing. But I think if one thing that you would look is a constant throughout our entire civilization is what's been the constant across all communication, it's storytelling.
Absolutely. We'll change angle a little bit here now.
Okay.
So I've worked with organisations throughout New Zealand to help them adopt AI, and there's often a theme that comes through, in that using AI for creative work can be seen as cheating in some way, and can have the potential to remove the human element. I've got personal views on this, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, and I address this very strongly in the book with literally, is AI cheating? Because I get a lot of pushback, like, oh, AI is cheating, and so first of all, it's not. It's not cheating at all. Is the short answer to that. But I actually use an example of writing a book. So when I write a book, I have an idea. And I run it past my publisher, and they sort of go, what about this? What about this? What about this? So I'm getting creative ideas that will, change the direction of the book. And so I write the book, and then I send it to my editor, and they edit, in, out, that's not making sense, do this. Then I go through the publisher, and it goes through another editing process. And so all along the way, I'm asking for input and advice. Now, no one would if I've told you my process of writing the book, you're not going to go, well, that's cheating, you should just do that yourself. Like, that would be stupid to not get input like that. And it's the same thing with, using AI. It's just one of your creative partners. So even another example around the book, Ben, when you get to write a book, and there's several books inside you, my friend, I'm sure, one of the hardest parts is coming up with the title and the subtitle. I swear to God, it is so hard. In every book I've written, I've had the title. It's never actually been the title. That's because I go to the publisher and they go, nah, that's not going to work, not going to work. So the working title, I've thought it's the title, but it ends up being the working title. And I again was struggling to come up with what I wanted this book to be called. So I turned to ChatGPT and I said, I'm writing a book. This is the premise of the book. Can you give me 10 suggestions of a title? Came back with 10. Nothing grabbed me. Can you give me another 10? Nothing grabbed me. Can you give me another 10? Can you give me? And I think it gave me 50. And one of them was narrative intelligence. Now, I don't like the word narrative. I think people use the word narrative replace story, but it's not. And but straight away I went, ooh, I don't like narrative intelligence, but I freaking love story intelligence. So so that gave me the idea. Now, I don't know, would I come up, so gave me the idea. And then I did the same with the subtitles, because if you think the title is hard, oh my God, the subtitles 100 did the same thing. Came up, wasn't happy, but kept going. Happy with some of it, changed it a bit. Sent it to my publisher. I did not love any of them. And then I've got a good mate of mine called Cairn who's like, she's a creative marketing, and she just says it's not about being more creative. It's about coming up with more ideas. That's what creativity is about. So I gave it to her, and she came back with about 20. And the one I landed, I really liked that one, and I sent them to Wiley, and they said, we did a little bit of a poll in the office, and overwhelmingly, this is the one. And I was like, so in the end, human creativity still outwon on AI creativity, but I'm using, just like I would go to my friend Kieran to ask for input, why would I not ask AI for input? But again, I think the key here, Ben, is in the end, I still made the decision. I'm still making the decision. Don't give up control.
Absolutely. So do you think that is the demarcation in terms of the use of these tools, where you're bouncing ideas off to get either critique or additional ideas, testing things, and you make the final decision? Is that the demarcation? Or
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think in the end, it's like, use it as one. I always say, like, if you've got a team, use AI as one of your team members, and just like you would get advice from everyone else. Again, if you're a team leader, you might get input from your team, but ultimately you make the decision. And I think that's where it is. Like, I think using AI cheating is, I wouldn't even say it's cheating. It'd be using AI incorrectly. Like, if you're just taking what AI says and doing it, it's just not going to work, right? So, that I think you're spot on. As long as you stay in control of it and you make the final decision and you be responsible for it. I talk about this too. We know AI hallucinates, and it can come up with some, it's very eager to please, and it's very eager to pleaseness. It sometimes comes up things that are wrong. And if you just take that and put it out there and it's wrong, and someone says, and you've shared a story, and it might be a public story, right? Like, so it's not your own story, but it's something happened, but you used AI to find it and you share it, and someone says, but that's incorrect, that didn't happen. You can't go, oh, that's not my fault, that was AI, ChatGPT told me that. No way. That is, you need to make sure that's right. And like, you got to be responsible for it.
No, you can't delegate that accountability.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing I like to say about AI is it's like a happy Labrador. You say, go and get me the newspaper, boy, and it brings you back a dirty sock.
Yeah. Yeah.
I often use that analogy because people can relate to it. They're like, oh yeah, it wants to please. But it doesn't always bring you back the right result.
Yeah. I often say it's a very eager, excited intern. It really wants to please, but sometimes it's not going to be right, and that's fine. That's all good as long as you know that.
Are you seeing an increasing number of people, leaders, telling stories and passing that demarcation point where they're allowing AI to dictate too much of their story or change it in ways that aren't productive for them?
Look, I don't think I'm seeing I think the answer is no, I'm not seeing a lot of that, only because I'm not seeing a lot of people use AI to help with their storytelling for a start. So I think that's what you're talking about may potentially start happening in a couple of years, where you go, whoa, I know I said to use AI, but remember the creative partner bit and take control. And that's for your personal stories. What I am seeing a lot of, and we spoke about, is just general content, like getting AI to write an article on, agile or whatever, and you can just, all the telltale signs that this is AI generated content. It's sort of Yeah, and I've always thought about, you and I have discussed thought leadership a lot. It was like, it's like outsourcing your thought leadership. And I see a lot of senior people, want to be known as thought leaders and outsource their thought leadership to someone else. Now, I reckon that's cheating. I seriously think that's cheating. You can't outsource your own thought leadership. You've got to do the work and you've got to do the thinking. So yeah, I'm not seeing it as much with storytelling, but like I said, only because I think people haven't started to adopt how to use AI in their storytelling. But hopefully the new book educates people on how to do that well.
Absolutely. And I think those personal stories, as you've said, absolutely have the cut through.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I have, and this is one of my terms I've come up with, is knowledge homogenation. So homogenization.
Like it?
The idea that generative AI is kind of self-fulfilling. It's all information that we've put in there, and it'll regurgitate based on probability around a distribution. So what I like to think of the story around this for me is when I was young, we had glass bottles of milk, and the predominant variety had a silver top, and you had a layer of cream on the top, which for me was the best bit. But over time, this milk's disappeared, and every bottle is now more or less the same. You've got low fat, high fat, but it's all been mixed in. It's homogenized now. So I feel a lot of the results that can come out of AI can generate homogenized content or the homogenization of knowledge, and it becomes a little bit generic. It doesn't diminish the value of the idea generation value or the critiquing it can do. It probably sharpens that in a lot of ways because it has so much experience and ability to do that. I have seen some people in some organizations start to rely on AI a little bit too much.
Yes.
And so they do become a little bit homogenized in terms of their generic responses. So I'm very happy to hear that you're not seeing that happening in the storytelling realm.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what you said there too, and it's a great analogy, and it just sort of had really moments from me of in primary school, the milk would always be delivered and let out in the sun. Was it always left in the sun? You always sort of like, there's a shady spot over there that the delivery man could. Anyway, that's another point. But it is this over-reliance on AI, and you see it, and it starts to become homogenized. It starts to become generic. So to give a really quick example that happened just 2 days ago with my daughter. So my daughter Jess is she's just finished her graduation. She's done agricultural science, and she's applying for graduation roles. So she did her CV, which was all, this is what I've done, my work experience, blah, blah, blah. And then she had to write a cover letter. Now, I sat down with her and I said, so what are you going to? She goes, I might just put it in ChatGPT to write the cover letter. And I go, yeah, and every other candidate will be doing that, okay? So, and also, all ChatGPT is going to do is summarize your resume, which is not what a cover letter should be. And so I said, and this is the first thing they're going to read. They're not going to read your resume. They're going to read the cover letter first. So you've got to stand out. And so she's agricultural science. It's working with animals, which she's love about. And I said, why don't you just talk about, literally start, ever since I was a kid, I've been passionate about animals, from catching pigeons when I was 4 at childcare, to befriending a wild owl, to hounding my parents to get us a dog. I've been obsessed with animals. It was the reason, and I always thought I'd be a vet, but then I realized I could work with animals, and that's why I applied. That's why I enrolled in the agricultural science. The subjects that I really loved were about animal welfare and yada yada yada. And it's just, I go, just you, about why you're passionate about animals. And she said to me, so I helped her, and she went, Mum, I'm not sure, because, it's really important. This is a post-grad role, so it needs to be serious. And I'm going, it is serious. It's just going to stand out. So and coming back to that, Ben, I think some people are going, well, I don't want to stand out too much, or I don't want to bring, because this is professional and it's serious. And so what they end up doing is they end up sounding exactly the same as everyone else. And it's going to take Jess, she actually has to submit it today, and I'm going to leave it with her. But if she decides she doesn't want to do that, she'll do that, because it's going to take a little bit of courage, because it's a bit different. And I think that's why a lot of leaders step away from it, because it's a bit different and they don't have the courage to do it. And
But it's what memorable though, isn't it?
oh yeah, it'll be memorable.
You remember the cream on the
yeah,
top.
yeah, exactly. And I can guarantee you, it was like, you can imagine you've got 100 grad things to go, and someone's talking about, and befriending a wild owl. It's like, hang on a minute, how did that happen? It's going to be the memorable standout application, in my humble opinion.
Absolutely. So in terms of, I guess, important traits or capabilities that leaders should be looking to cultivate as we enter this new age with human AI partnership, what do you think that those most important qualities are?
Look, I think it is a couple of things with AI. I think it's not going away. It's the biggest technical revolution of our lifetime. And I remember when I worked at National Australia Bank and the internet came in, and part of my job was teaching people how to use the internet, right? So we've come a long way, but this is knocking that out of the ballpark in regards to how it's going to change our life. So I think you just need to experiment. You can't break things. So I would say give it a go. And there's a lot of people like yourself that are teaching people how to use AI wisely and effectively. So the first is give it a go. And then once you give it a go, I think don't get sucked in to go, oh my God, this sounds really good. This sounds really good. It's, again, don't surrender. Don't lose your voice in it. And do not lose your voice. And you still want it to sound like you. If you're losing your voice, if you're over-relying on it, I guarantee you it's starting to sound bland and beige and pretty obvious it's AI-generated content. So give it a go. Maintain control at all time.
Great. Recently, I spoke at an education conference and I closed with AI plus humans equal the future of work.
Yep.
What do you see the role of education and lifelong learning being, or the role of AI and storytelling and how it coexists in a world where we're preparing our kids, the future generation for a new world that's going to be much like the internet. It's going to be built on AI.
Yeah, okay. I was interested, you're calling it AI plus human. Should it be human plus AI, or was that deliberate?
Wow, I had changed around their theme.
Yeah, okay,
was,
all right.
A little bit different. And it's more of a formula than that. It's not just the future of work relies on AI.
No. Yeah, look, I've had a lot of people say to me, the younger generation, they're going to really struggle with critical thinking and creativity because of AI. I actually disagree because, again, using AI is a part of creativity. Like, I'm going to use that and I'm going to take the good bits, and so that's part of creativity. I think they're going to get much stronger at critical thinking because, when we grew up, we got our news source from one spot, probably the morning news, and it was the truth. According to us, it was the truth. And now, there's so much news sources. It's so hard to distinguish what's true and not true that I think critical thinking for this generation will be second nature. So I actually don't have a problem at all with the younger generation dealing with this, because they'll probably deal with it a lot better than we deal with it, because they're getting introduced to it to such a young age. In regards to, I guess, AI and how we use it and how we adopt it, is it okay if I read something from my book?
Go for it.
So I actually, I don't know if you've ever read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. So it's a story around, it's a book around creativity. And in it, she writes a letter to fear, because she talks about fear's always on the road with her when it comes to creativity. So I was inspired by that. So I wrote a letter to AI, and I sort of think it helps, explain how we could use AI. So let me read it to you. It goes like this. Dearest AI, creativity and I are about to go on a road trip together, and I invite you to join us. I will be doing my job on this road trip, which is to work hard and stay focused. And creativity will be doing its job, which is to remain stimulating and inspiring. There is plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us, so make yourself at home. But understand this. Creativity and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognise and respect the supporting and valuable role you can play. So I will at times ask you for advice and suggestions along the way. But understand that I will always make the final decision and I will always be in control. Don't take this personally, as I know you won't, because you are not a person. But I know sometimes while you are eager, you hallucinate. So sometimes you are wrong. You also to have a voice when asked, but my dear friend AI, you are absolutely forbidden to drive. I will always be in control. And I think if you approach AI like that, you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Fantastic. And I think that wraps up everything that we've talked about today, Rel, so well. So I want to thank you so much for joining me. It was so great to have the opportunity to talk with you, talk about your new book. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. And I know that you've got your book launch happening at the moment and you're flat out with that. And I guess it's been flat out for months. And to the people out there listening and watching, if you want to grab a copy, it's now in bookshops.
Yeah, it's in bookshops all over the place, online, in store.
You can probably get a copy before Christmas.
Oh, absolutely. And look, it's
fantastic.
You know what, it's green and white, right? If you stick a red ribbon around that is the colours of Christmas sorted. I've got all my little post-it notes on it. But yeah, definitely. Get it before Christmas.
And I've got one final question for you, Rel. Mm-hmm. In the age of AI, what is the one trait that defines human leadership?
Authenticity.
Awesome.
That's it.
Love it.
That's where AI fails.
Great. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
That's the Cairn. Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, share it with a leader in your network who needs to hear it. Subscribe wherever you listen to stay updated on the next conversation. Visit cairn.nz for show notes, resources and more. Connect with us on LinkedIn or Instagram for updates in between episodes. I'm Ben Walker. We'll be back soon with another conversation that matters. See you then.